good day, everybody. Welcome back to our Working Together series, live with Rabbi Karmi Ingber, with our good friends at Netiv, and we're joined by many people in the Zoom room. We're just waiting on the Rabbi to show up, and then we'll start. Rod Bryant of Netiv will be with us shortly as well, so bear with us. We'll be right back. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for your patience. Rabbi Ingber's now in the room along with Rod Bryant, so we're glad to be with them. So let's jump right in. And, shalom, shalom, Rabbi Ingber. Always good to be with you. I'm going to just turn off my camera for you so you don't get the feedback loop. And we hear you're going to start the book of Ezra for us tonight.
Yeah. I decided we will go into another book. And I decided the book of Ezra. So not explain to you why we're up to, but I think like everything, you'll start learning everything is relevant. It's fascinating. There's an idea that there's something called the Daf Yomi, the page of the day, that set up that people learn Talmud on the page of the day. Whenever I learn it, it comes out that it happens to be that day something is relevant to that page to what's happening in the world. And that's what happens whenever you have a certain study that you take on in the Torah, start to see how these things are
Recording in
playing
progress
out in your life. So I think we're going to learn the book of Ezra, and we're going to see it's very relevant to what's going on. And as we go through it, I think it's become more and more relevant. Let me give you a little introduction about the book of Ezra, where it is and what it's about. We'll do a little introduction, and we'll start a little bit. Next, we'll get into it more. So let's go a little bit of history. Okay, who is Ezra? Is this Ezra? And what period of time does he live? How is this going to affect what's happening? Understand like this. Let's just have a sweeping discussion of history and the purpose of the world. God created the world, and the purpose of the creation was that God wanted to give good to created entities. That was the purpose. For that to happen, we had to be put into a world that's not so easy. Because if God...
Rabbi, apologize. The sound broke off. I couldn't hear what you say. God created the world. And then I couldn't hear it after that. Sorry.
Okay, let me just make sure my volume is okay. Is my volume okay now, everybody?
Yes.
Okay, how is it now? We're okay now?
Yes.
Great.
Sorry about that.
Right. Okay, so I can move the mic closer and I can actually raise the volume. Just give me one more second. Everyone tell me how this sounds. Okay. So let's do that. I'm going to move a little closer. And that's clear right now. It's good?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so I was saying, God created the world in order to give good to his creation. It's a very important philosophical discussion. Because people say, well, why did God create the world? If somebody says God did it because he had a need, that is idolatry, large. Because God doesn't have needs, right? God is, we can understand God's perfect in every way. But it is the way of the good to want to give good. And therefore, God wanted to create entities, right? Human beings that can receive his good. Now, in order to do that, he had to put us into a world that we had to be the owners of the good. In other words, God could have created us perfect and just gotten all the pleasure that he wanted to give to us, connecting to him, but then we wouldn't have earned it ourselves. We would have been like little kids or beggars that take and don't earn it themselves. So therefore, God created us with tremendous potential, put us into a world with many, many challenges. And when we choose properly, we earn our connection to God through our own actions. And that is obviously the highest level for us. If you think about it, any person gets something and doesn't earn it themselves, they don't have the real pleasure from the thing that they have. Because I didn't do anything, you just gave it to me. When I earn it, I have a tremendous pleasure that I earned the thing that I have received. That too is the concept in the world. God created the world, all of its challenges, put us in a situation that when we choose properly, we build ourselves, make ourselves God-like. We can then experience God through our own action. Now, when God created the world, he wanted people to purify themselves and to come to a level that they could experience God and his goodness in this world. And certainly after this lifetime, when we're even beyond this physical level we're in today, they could experience the goodness of God and connect him in the deepest way. The goal, therefore, is to have a world right now that God's presence is experienced in the world. When the Jews were in Egypt, as we just had the story before, that was going to be the beginning of the formation of this nation. It was going to take the mission of God and bring it into the world fully, into all of humanity. As we said before, Adam and Eve were not created Jewish or not Jewish. It was universal. But from the time of Adam and Eve, people were not acting righteous. 10 generations to Noah, people were terrible. 10 generations from Noah to Abraham, they were also terrible. Very, very few people were not. Abraham was a person that found God, brought God into the world. He chose God, and therefore God chose him. But Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were individuals. The story of Egypt is becoming a nation. And when the Jewish people are in the pain and suffering of Egypt, that's the formation of the nation. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, we all know this. You know, most of the time when you grow, it's not because things were so great. Most of the times you think about an experience that was life-changing, you say, I became a better person. Usually it was something that was different. You had to elevate yourself. And this was God promised Abraham, that part of the Jewish people coming to the nation was their being enslaved to Egypt. And that process, until they went through that and then they came out of it, that's how they became purified as a nation. I just want to, as an aside, you know, not to get into politics, but sometimes Jewish people really fight for the underdog so much, and sometimes people who are not, let's say, Jews who know the Torah, they misguide that yearning, but it comes from part of the DNA of the Jewish people as they were slaves. When a person is a slave or a person suffers, you can relate to people who have challenges. That's the reality. As a matter of fact, it says many times in the Torah, 46 times, it says the law against making a stranger feel downtrodden. You can't go and have a person who is, you know, going through challenges and not care about them. You can't say words that would make them feel even insulted, remind them of their own, you know, position and in life if they are in a role of a stranger. And it says, why? Because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You experienced yourself. You know, when we were kids, like the bully in school was the kid who everything was great for him. You know, once the person goes through some challenges, they become sensitive to another person. The Jewish people were in Egypt. They came out and they were in Egypt. They go into the desert, they receive the Torah, and the goal is to come into the land of Israel. And coming into the land of Israel, which is here right now, is then to have a land where God's presence will be felt clearly. From Jerusalem, says, comes out that God's presence is felt most intensely in Israel, most intensely in Jerusalem, most intensely in the place of the Holy Temple. And from there, it comes out the entire.
Rabbi, could you move closer to the microphone, because you're keep telling out like you're too far back and it keeps cutting you out or something.
Okay, this should be good now. All right, is this good now where I am? I move the mic?
Yes.
All right, good. So now the Jewish people are going to come into the land of Israel, as I was saying, and that's going to be the focal point where God's presence will be felt. And therefore, the goal is to have God's presence able to be palpable in the world. The way this is going to transpire is through a central place where everyone can gather together. Now, it's theoretically possible in the story of the journey in the desert that maybe everyone would have been so holy that God's presence would have been on every individual by themselves. But once humanity couldn't come to that level, everyone had to unite together to create a unified a concept that God's presence can be felt through unifying the people. That was going to be the idea of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. Okay? That is the place of people make a mistake. The Western Wall is not the holiest place in Judaism. That's absurd. The Western Wall is a wall around the mountain on which the temple stood. Just so people understand the history here, what's called the Dome of the Rock was not a mosque. It was originally created. I forget who built it, but it was a Muslim leader. I got his name now. He built it as a tribute to the temple of King Solomon that he built on that place. That's why it's the Dome of the Rock. The rock was the place. There was a giant rock that has much mystical discussion about how that is the center or the foundation point somehow in the world. In the time of the first temple, that is literally where the rock is, where the ark sat on that rock. In the second temple, the ark was already hidden in the labyrinths underneath the temple when the kings of Israel realized that there was going to be a destruction of the first temple. They hid the ark so it wouldn't be captured. And throughout the second temple, that's 420 years, the service in the Holy of Holies was on the rock. So the Dome of the Rock is obviously, they built it as a tribute to the temple and this place. It is the place. My book is called "When the Heavens Kiss the Earth." I didn't make that term up. That term is the place of the Temple Mount. It's called "When the Heavens Kiss the Earth," and that is the point where Abraham offered Isaac as an offering, where Jacob had his dream of the ladder, where eventually was the place where King Solomon built the temple, where God's presence was felt clearly. So much so that there is a story that seems to have validity in the sources, that when the first temple was destroyed, the temple that Solomon built, Shlomo built, that what happened was the Plato, the philosopher, was traveling with the Babylonians at the time, and he met, according to the story, if it's literal, if it's figurative, but he met the prophet Jeremiah. And he saw Jeremiah crying. And he said, "You're supposed to be the wise man of the Jewish people. You're crying over a building?" And this is what he told him. He said, "There's two reasons why I cry. I want you to ask me any philosophical question you have. philosopher Plato must have incredible questions. He asked them to the prophet Jeremiah, and he answered them all on the spot. And Plato was shocked. He said, how could a person have this knowledge? He said, because every time I walked into the holy temple, I had the presence of God and I understood. It was the moment of, I mean, could you imagine in life? Could you imagine a place where you would enter and you'd have clarity? I mean, it's the greatest thing in the world. The second reason he said, I can't tell you, you'll never understand. I'll leave that open for us to think about. But that was the temple that was built on that spot by King Shlomo, Solomon, the son of King David, who, as I mentioned before, was potentially going to be the Messiah, the Mashiach. Right? We talk about the Messiah, the son of David. King Shlomo, Solomon is Shalem, is wholeness. He potentially was going to be the Mashiach. Didn't succeed. He was a great leader. He made mistakes, and he did not merit to become Mashiach, the Messiah. But during his time, it was clear, God was clear in the world. There were, you want to have a solution to climate change? I'll give you a global destruction. I'll give you a very simple solution. Everyone get their act together spiritually. During the time of King Solomon, there was no droughts, there was no famines, there was no earthquake. So I know we have a little tunnel vision. We can't imagine that God runs the world and he can make what he wants, but that happens to be the truth. So during the time of King Shlomo, they weren't having conventions in Davos, what to do. But what was happening was people had their act together. They were serving God. And because of that, there was no suffering in the world for anybody. That's what was happening during the time of King Shlomo. Now, the book, I have recordings on it, and I can send out some of the recordings, one eventually, but I did a series on the books of Kings, which then tells the story of the Jewish people for the whole time of the first temple. The first temple stood for 410 years. And there were great times, and there weren't such great times, because that's the way it works, To be the king is not easy. Go ask the royal family in England. What happens is you're the king and you can do what you want, and you got to guard yourself that you remain righteous. As is the Torah law I mentioned to you before. The law in the Torah is the king needs to travel all the time with a Torah. Could you imagine that? It's unbelievable. He has to carry the Holy Torah with him all the time. He goes to the baseball game. He needs to have two chairs, one for him, one for his Torah. He flies. He can go first class, maybe. He's the king. But he has to have a seat there next to him for his Torah wherever he goes. Why? Because if you don't, it says, Lebilti Rom Levavo, that his heart shouldn't become elevated and say, I'm better, I'm the king. And by the way, and this is a tribute to America, it's just misplaced now. That's why Americans really recoil from the whole royalty. Because you saw the kings of Europe were so evil, so above the people, and on the whole, that America said, well, we don't want that. But the idea of the king is supposed to be the righteous person who sees himself as a servant of God, and he brings God's kingdom into the world. That's why King David is the humblest of all people. It's amazing. We talked about it once before, but if you ever read in Psalms that King David wrote, or in the book of Samuel, King David talks like this. He calls himself a dead dog. He calls himself a worm. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine the president of the United States saying, what am I? I'm a dead dog, I'm a worm. No, he doesn't think that. This was King David, the greatest of the great. But he had this humility because he could be the king, because his job was to bring God to the world. So King Solomon builds the temple, but the problem is that as there are different kings that come up, some of them are not so great. Okay? And trouble starts. And some of the kings were very righteous, King Asa and King Hizkiah, they were very great. but there were some kings that really weren't. King Chizkiah, I guess in English called Kaya, King Hezekiah, King Chizkiah, he didn't want to have children. And the prophet Jeremiah, Yeshaya comes to him, Isaiah comes to him and says, I have a message that I got from God that King Chizkiah, you're going to die. You're getting punished. You didn't want to have children. Pack it up. So King Chizkiah says to Isaiah, I tell you why I didn't have kids. I prophetically saw that I was going to have kids that were going to be terrible. And they were going to lead the Jews astray. That's why I didn't do it. What do you think, guys? Good reason? Sounds like a pretty good reason to me. He tells them, that's the reason. I saw prophetically, I'm going to have kids that are going to be terrible, and they're going to lead the Jewish people astray. I can't do it. So Isaiah says to him, and the secrets of God is none of your business. In life, you got to do what's right. How it's going to play out, no. You got to do what you have to do. So he says to him, you were supposed to, you had a commandment, you're supposed to have children, you didn't want to do it. That's it. So listen to this. So as Hezekiah hears this, and he thinks about it, right? So he says to Isaiah, okay, listen, I got a plan. Let me marry your daughter. And maybe with merits for my family and my lineage, King David, and your lineage, and we'll have kids that will end up being righteous. Isaiah says, I don't think you heard me so well. I told you you're going to die. I'm not giving my daughter to a guy who's going to be dead very soon. So he said to him, okay, Isaiah, get out of the town. I have a tradition, my great-great-grandfather, King David, that even if a sword is on a person's throat, he should not refrain from praying, because God could change the decree. And that's what happened. He prayed, and God moved the decree and lived 15 more years. He ended up marrying Yeshaya's daughter. They ended up having a kid who is really as bad as he saw in the prophecy. He became the next king of Israel. His name was Menashe. He ruled for 55 years. But the first 22 was so bad that he put the people on a trajectory he couldn't fix. He tried to repent in his life for many, many years. He tried to repent, but he couldn't fix it up. Because once you open the floodgates for something, it's very hard to take it back. You know, I once, I see we have people of different ages. So like, my brother's generation was the 60s. It was at Woodstock. And I was a little bit later. But I once heard an interview with a beatnik with a pre-hip. And the guy said something incredible. He said, we unleashed forces that we had no idea what we were doing. Because you look back at the 60s and you say, oh, these people are talking about free love, this and that. Okay, it had its problems, but everything was supposed to be about love. And meantime, once those barriers came down, society got worse and worse and worse. And that's the way it works. When you take down certain fences that keep people in order, then it spirals. Like there's a Mishnah, Pirkei Avos. Those who want to defund the police need to read this Mishnah. It says you have to pray for the government that has laws, because without them, people will swallow each other up alive. Okay, you're not getting rid of police, and then people say, "Oh, wait." So Menashe, he did some bad stuff in the beginning. He brought an idol into the temple. He was he was adamantly and ferociously trying to uproot the traditional Jewish values and beliefs. And he was trying different idolatries. And then he wanted to fix it, but he couldn't because the cat was out of the bag. Everything was going off. And that sent people on a trajectory that the temple was going to be destroyed. There was prophecy the temple was going to be destroyed. There was a great king after that, King Yoshiao, in English, Josiah, I think as they call him. And Yoshiao, he tried to fix it, but he almost did. Almost, he was the greatest at getting the people to repent, but wasn't his tool. And now we're coming into the destruction of the first. So we had a place and a period of time where God's presence was clear in the world. But when people started acting not properly and their leaders led them astray, which unfortunately happened, so things started getting unraveled. And already, even though the great king Yoshiao, Josiah, tried to move it back, it was not successful. Mistakes, but very, very right. And then afterwards, his children started to take over, and it was the beginning of it. There was a prophecy already by the prophet Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah. The temple was going to be destroyed. And the king, the son of Yoshiao would not. As a matter of fact, Jeremiah wrote the book of Lamentations, the book of Eicha, telling this is what's going to happen. Change your ways. If you change your ways, you could change everything. But if you don't, the temple will be destroyed. Jewish people will go into exile. And the king, I'm the son of great righteous Yoshiao, King Hoyakim, he burnt the book. This is one of the holy books, one of the 24 books of the Tanakh. Eicha, first version that Jeremiah wrote, he burnt. Okay? And he threw Jeremiah in jail. People think, oh, wow, you have a good friend named Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu, great prophet. He spent his life being hated. Because imagine going around telling everyone that, the end is near, they're going to be exiled. He was thrown in jail, he was persecuted. People didn't want to listen to him. The righteous people did, but people in power didn't want to listen to him. And then what happens is, in the time of the final king, sons of Yoshiao, time of Yehoiakim, there's a prophecy from Jeremiah. This prophecy is crucial because this is the period of time we're going to be talking about in this whole series of the book of Ezra. Yirmiyahu has a prophecy that the temple will be destroyed. He even says the name of the person that will destroy the temple. He says the king Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, who was at that time, he became the president. King yet, but he was going to become king. He will destroy the holy temple. And then, in the prophecy of Jeremiah, it says that Jews, then the Babylonians, will rise 70 years, and after 70 years, God will he will appoint his people. There's different things that Jeremiah said that people were very confused about. Because he said this prophecy where it said there are 70 years from this Babylonian rise till the Jews return to the land of Israel. Okay? The king Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, he now fights against this Jewish king, son of Josiah, of Yoshiao. He fights against him and he exiles. many of the Jewish leaders. Okay? He takes king, exiles him. He exiles all the sages to Babylon. He exiles some great people you probably heard of, like Daniel, right? Daniel. He takes the wise people from the Jewish people and he makes them the advisors to the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? So he takes Daniel and Daniel's associates and all of the other greats and the king at the time, who was actually the son of the other king who got killed, Funya, and he exiles them to Babylon. All right, good. Now let's get one more history part, and then we'll start understanding what we're talking about in the introduction to this book of Ezra. So now Babylon is supposed to go and exist, says 70 years, and God will bring us back. Now, there were three great kings, leading kings in Babylon. Netzar, he had a son, Mordech, and then another son, Belshazzar. You might have heard this story of Belshazzar. Belshazzar was the third king, and it's the famous story where the phrase comes out, read the writing on the wall, right? You all heard that phrase? You read the writing on the wall? What's that from? It's the story of the Torah, the story of the Tanakh. He sees he's having this party, this third king of Babylon, 70 years from his grandfather rose to power, having this big party. In the middle of the party, sees this writing on the wall, like a hand coming out, this vision, and the hand's writing something, and he doesn't know what it is, and they're freaking out. And they what is this? They say, listen, it was your grandfather had a great advisor, Daniel, who was already kind of pushed to the side. Bring him out, he'll tell you what it says. So calls Daniel, says, listen, I'll give you a third of the kingdom, I'll make you a big shot. Tell me what it says. It says you're gonna die. It says that you've been weighed out for what you've done, and you're finished. Now, what did he do? What did he do that night that was so bad? And this is an incredible backdrop to understand this. I told you that Jeremiah had a prophecy that the Jews, that there would be this rise of the Babylonians that would conquer the Jewish people, and it would be 70 years until the Jews returned. So the Babylonian king thought the 70 years started from the rise of his grandfather, the first Babylonian king. He was off. It was going to start from when he conquered the Jewish people. So what happened was, that night, this night with the famous story of the writing on the wall, what happened was, when the Babylonians conquered and destroyed the first temple, they took a lot of the holy vessels of the temple. And these vessels were sanctified and they were used in the holy service in the temple. He took them out and started drinking out of them. Because why? He said 70 years passed, according to his calculation. The Jews are never going back. That's it. Babylonians will stay on. And that was his big party, was taking out the vessels and using them for his own purposes. And that night, he had the calculation wrong. Had he died, there was a Persian revolt, right? Historically, the Persians took over from the Babylonians, okay? And there was a relationship between Persia and this place called Media, and they together revolted against the Babylonians and they killed them. They killed the king, and they took over the rulership of the world. As Persia and Media were the next great nation. Now, I said he had the wrong calculation. When was the 70 years really supposed to happen? So now Persia becomes the new big shot on the block. The first king, his name was Darius the Mede. He was the father-in-law of Persian king who took over from him. He died after a year. And the Persian king was called Koresh. Those are the first two kings in the Persian dynasty. father-in-law and son-in-law. And now Koresh, it actually was the 70 years, because it didn't go from when Babylonia started, but it started from when they conquered the Jewish people. So 70 years theoretically was up during the time of this king, second king, who took over after 1 year, of Persia named Koresh. I don't know, in English, I guess it's called Koresh too. Is that right? In English, it's called Koresh? Yeah. So this is now the story of this king. This was a Persian king who was apparently a righteous king. He said to the Jews, go back. And this is how the book of Ezra starts, with this story. Okay? So he was seemingly the Cyrus, right? Thank you. Yeah, Koresh Cyrus. Thank you. That's the English. Sorry. Okay. So Koresh Cyrus. Thank you. So he sends the Jews back to the land of Israel. And this seems to be the 70-year cycle that we're talking. Okay. So now the Talmud says that it's a verse in the prophet that calls Koresh the Mashiach, the anointed. That's very weird, because he's not the Mashiach. There's different explanations. One explanation is the anointed one is a noble term. Doesn't just to explain what the word Mashiach means. It means they anointed the king, put the oil on their head. We talk about the Messiah. We're talking about specifically the one that will finally redeem the world. But a person that's an anointed one was a person of greatness. So Koresh was in the beginning a righteous king of Persia. As a matter of fact, he was told by Daniel this was going to happen. He was told by Daniel that you were going to go and overcome Babylon, and you're supposed to go and build a temple. Okay? So now that's the backdrop. So now, and Lizzie, I want you to understand this. The story of Ezra now is going to be talking about this period of time between the exile of the Jews in Babylon, okay, until they return to the land of Israel. Okay? And that's why this story is going to be very, very relevant. Why? Because it's happening right now. It's happening right now. What's happening is that people, Israel next week will have the 75th anniversary of when it became a state. And so most people here in their lifetime, that was already a reality. But like 200 years ago, that was the last thing to imagine, was that the Jews were back in the land of Israel. They were out of it for almost 2,000 years. The prophecies said that this was going to happen. Yeah, but they hadn't seen it. Now it's a reality. But then it wasn't. So the process of the return to Zion, and third return to Zion, which is the third temple, right? That is in full swing, right? There are the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob line up with the three temples. The first one and the second one, it says, will not remain forever. The third one is the one that remains. That's the process that we're in right now. Okay? So we're going to talk about the story of Ezra. Ezra is going to lead the Jews back in the second temple time. He is going to be involved in establishing the Jewish Commonwealth and making enactments that is going to protect the Jewish people in the long exile that will happen after the second temple is destroyed. That is all what Ezra does. He is part of the final prophets. Okay? During the second temple period of time, prophecy ends. Okay? So this is a crucial time, because this is ushering in the it's the beginning of the Second Temple period, with going into that, but it ushers in the time that leads in the exile to the Third Temple. Okay, so that is sort of the introduction, and I'm going to take some questions, ideas, comments on that, and then we're going to start a little bit of the book of Ezra from the beginning, and we'll take it from there. So, any questions, ideas, thoughts about what we said so far? No, we're good. We're clear. Yep. Okay. Good. I'm going to start reading in the book of Ezra, and I'm going to explain a little bit what's happening, and we'll take it. So now, in the book of Ezra, it starts the first year of this king Cyrus, Koresh. Okay, and now the 70 years has passed in Jeremiah's prophecy. King Koresh now, he makes a decree and he puts it in writing. This is very important. I'm going to see why later. He puts it in writing, and he announces throughout his kingdom that the king of Persia is now some of this. Verse 2, Natan li Hashem Elokei Hashemayim. God, the king of the heavens, has given me. Okay? He's given me all these kingdoms. He was a massively powerful king. And he has commanded me to build his house in Jerusalem. Okay? So you have a Persian king, not a Jewish king, but he, at this stage of his life, is righteous. He might not have all the best ideas. He might not be so, like, he calls God the king, the God of the heavens. Some of the commentaries say, like, he sort of viewed his role as, well, the earth is being controlled by me and people in power. He might not have had the most perfect theology, but he did view he had a role to do that God wanted him to do, to go and to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. And he gets it. He gets it. He just saw what happened to the kings of Babylon. He wants to do this. Now, in verse 3, he does something that is questionable, and he did the wrong thing. He now says in verse 3, whoever, who amongst the people, that God will be with him, and he'll go up to Jerusalem, and he'll build a temple. This was not exactly right, because the prophecy of Jeremiah was that to be built, and God wanted him to take more of a powerful role in it. He basically said, whoever wants to go up, go up. And that was a bit of an abdication of his own responsibility. Okay? And verse 4, he says, whoever wants to stay, okay, the people who are staying in the Persia, Babylon area should support the ones going up to build the temple. Okay? And now people do rise up, and they do start to go back to Israel, and they have some of their leaders go. Zerubbabel, we'll see, it's not Ezra. Ezra does not go in the beginning. Now, wait a minute. This book is called the book of Ezra. And he was like, it says that, like, Ezra was so great that if the Torah wasn't given through Moshe, it could have been given through Ezra. He's compared in that way, so great, like Moshe. So why didn't Ezra go in the very beginning when Cyrus said, whoever wants to go, go? Ezra didn't come. He comes later. Why didn't he go in the beginning? And the reason was like this, because Ezra, a person, sometimes you go and you need to study something, know something to be able to help people. You want to be a doctor, you want to help people, you got to go to medical school. People sometimes want to go and help, but they don't have the tools they fully need. Ezra was going to be the great Torah giant of his generation. he was studying still by his rabbi, who was the student of Jeremiah. His name was Baruch ben Neri. He was studying by him, and his rabbi was old. His rabbi couldn't go. He was very old. And Ezra had to stay to completely understand the Torah that he had to go and to impart to everybody else. So he wasn't able to go yet. He said, yes, this is the time to go, but I can't go. I'm absorbed in the Torah learning that the world needs me to get right now. So Ezra does not go in the very beginning. Other leaders go. Mainly the head is called Zerubbabel or Sheshbatzar. Those are the names of the leaders, and they go and they start to, the people give them things. Cyrus takes out the vessels from the Holy Temple that they had stolen, and he gives them to the Jewish leaders to return to Israel. I mean, stealing people's, holy vessels is not a good idea. I want to ask you a question that maybe if someone knows the Pope, they can get this question to him. So if you look in the Arch of Titus, when they destroyed the Second Temple, you see them carrying the golden candelabra. It was very high. No, the menorah. It's in the picture of the Arch of Titus. They're carrying the vessels. Very large, right? Very large. It's see if guys how tall it is. A few feet high, solid gold, one piece of gold. Where'd that go? You think they misplaced it? That's right. So can we have it back? Can you send it back our way? Because we're building a third temple and we'd like our stuff back. Thank you very much. So yeah. So anyway, so Cyrus goes and he takes the stuff that was stolen and he returns it. He sends it back. And the people now go and they start to return to Jerusalem to build. Now, in chapter 2, it starts telling you the names specifically of the people that returned. It says the family names, it tells the leaders, people that went, Bavel, Shua, Nehemiah, Sariah, Ralia, Mordechai Balshan. Mordechai Balshan is the same Mordechai in the story of Esther. And it lists the families that went. It tells us literally how many people from each family. So we know the number that goes. 42,360 were the people that went, and it lists the names of the people. And it's very specific because there's a goal here. This book of Ezra is written by Ezra. And Ezra was a Kohen. He was a direct descendant of Aaron. And he says his lineage, 16 generations to Cohen Aaron. And Ezra wanted to make sure we go back to the land of Israel, that everyone knows who and what they are. There were some people that didn't have a clear lineage anymore. There were some Kohanim that couldn't trace if they were really Kohanim. So Ezra was not going to let them do the service in the temple because it was now not clear. So right now the book goes through specifically who went, what families went, how many, and who was able to do the service, who was questionable, who we didn't know, okay, who had lost their lineage during this period of exile. Okay. And it lists exactly the number of people and who went. Now, this process, now, as I said before, is going to be before Ezra goes. And I'm going to leave you with this one piece, which we're going to see next week. Although Koresh was in the beginning righteous, he's going to fall off. He gets into politics. And what's going to happen is that we're going to see next time the Samaritans. Who are the Samaritans? They were people that were brought into the land of Israel when in the old days, when they used to exile someone, they would bring other people into the land, move them around. So they would take you out of your land, put someone else in your land. So there were these people called the Shomronim, the Samaritans. They still exist. There's a small amount of them. Now, when they came to the land of Israel, they were. I think they came from. I think they brought them from Cyprus. And so these Samaritans, when they came to the land of Israel, they were idolaters. And what happened was, though, they started. There was a lion attack. So they were getting killed by wild animals. So they said, "Listen, we got to find out how do you worship the God of this land." So they never really converted, but they adopted Jewish customs, and they kept their old idolatry. And so therefore there's always a discussion throughout Talmudic times, and were they real converts or not? So we're going to see that them and other people, other of the locals who were in the land of Israel, who were not part of Jewish people, want to come and be involved with the building of this temple. The Jewish people say, well, you can't. I mean, you could participate as someone who is not part of the Jewish people. You're not part of the Jewish people. You can participate offerings, whatever it is, but don't pretend that they were Jewish, because they weren't. These people then are going to go to Cyrus, the king, and say, the Jews are building a rebellion again. And this king, Cyrus, Koresh, who could have been so great, bought into this. And he's going to stop the building of it. Okay, and we're going to see next time. So what happened to the prophecy of the 70 years? Because the temple is going to start to be built. The people go up, and without Ezra, but they have leaders, and they go up, and Cyrus seems to be really on board, and then he backs off. Then when the people, he gets the slanderous accusations, he says, stop building the temple. And the temple is going to be halted for numerous years. Okay? See, it's going to be halted now for 18 years. So we'll have to understand how the prophecy of Jeremiah of the 70 years is fulfilled, because they stopped building the temple. They'll get to it later. But this is the beginning of the story of Ezra. This is the story of the return to Zion. And it's a very fascinating time, because it's a period of time with the Jewish people, and this is historically also like I said to you before, 200 years ago, the Jews the land of Israel was desolate. And to be in the land of Israel was a dream. And when the Jews are in exile, it's not a good situation for them or for the entire world. And I want you to understand, as I told you before, the importance of the temple, but the importance of the Jewish people being in the land of Israel is not just for them. It's from Zion comes out the Torah to the whole world. It's important that they're on their land, and from there, the light spreads out to the entire world. But when they're in exile, a person gets lost. It feels like, am I gone? This 70 years of when the Jews were first exiled in Babylon, and they're starting to come back, there's that confusion. And ladies and gentlemen, I think we can relate to it in all of our lives. There's times where you're clear and you know what you're doing and you feel your life is meaningful. And then sometimes where you're just not sure. I'm not in my place. And I don't know what I'm doing. You feel that. That is this period, literally. They're in exile. They start to come back. They start to feel we're back in our land. This is happening. And then it's going to be halted. And now there's going to be a very tough period in the interim between the beginning of the return to Zion, the first year of Koresh, stops the building soon afterwards. There's going to be now a lag, I believe, about 18 years till the temple is not going to be built. Then it's going to be built again, finally. We're going to see what happened, how that happened, all those interactions. And that is the introduction to the book of Ezra. Any questions, comments, and ideas?
Wow. Well, Rabbi, somebody in the chat brought up a comment about the Samaritans. Where did they get the incorrect idea that the temple was supposed to be at Mount Gerizim?
So like this, Mount Har Gerizim, what the person is asking like this, is that the Samaritans today, the few that remain, live on Har Gerizim, Mount Gerizim. Why'd they go to Mount Gerizim? So this is an incredible thing. When you come to Israel, God willing, I'll give you a tour. My son's a tour guide. I'll give you a tour. We'll do a whole thing here. We'll take you around and we'll show you some of the amazing things in the Holy Land. One of the amazing things is like this. It says in the Torah that when the Jews crossed the Jordan and came into the land of Israel, there was a commandment they were supposed to go into the land, close to this area of Shem, and there were two mountains. One is called Mount Gerizim, one is called Mount Eva. And what happened was, it says in the Torah that 6 of the tribes were to stand on this mountain, Mount Gerizim, and 6 on Mount Eva. In the valley were the Kohanim and the Leviim. And what happened was, and it's amazing, if you go to today, you'll hear it. It's like an amphitheater. There is an echo from the valley that you can hear all the way on top of the mountain. And the Kohanim went down. This is in the Torah. It's a commandment in the Torah. When they first come to the land, they have the blessings and the curses. And the Kohanim would be in the center of the valley, and they would face Mount Gerizim, and they would say, "Blessed is the person that does this." 11 different things that it says in the Torah. Blessed is the person that does that. It's the person that does this, and there was 6 tribes on each mountain. Everyone said Amen. Then they turned to the second mountain, Mount Eval, and they said, "Cursed is the person who doesn't has a list of things. The person who puts a stumbling block in front of the blind." List of things there that are covenant the Jewish people came into, that when they came into the land, right? Because there were various covenants. Covenant that God said you have to take in when you come into the land, go to these 2 mountains, and the Kohanim will be in the middle, and they'll face each mountain, and people will answer Amen, and they'll take a vow to keep the Torah. That's the final of the blessing and cursing. So curses, blesses the person that keeps the Torah and upholds it fully, and curses the person who doesn't. So they faced Mount Gerizim for the blessings. They faced Mount Eval for the curse. This is very interesting, just to see it yourself. First of all, as I said to you, the valley is a natural amphitheater. You can understand how the Kohanim would say it, and they would hear it. Literally, sounds echo. When you go and you look at Mount Gerizim, it's green. That was the mountain, but it's green and beautiful. Literally, it's like a stone's throw away. The mountain across there is desolate. To this day, I mean, I haven't been there in years, but when I was there, I couldn't believe it. It's shocking. They're literally next to each other. The mountain of the blessings is the beautiful green, and the mountain that was the curse is like desolate. So in Hebrew today, in Israel, my son used to live there. It's called Har Bracha, Mountain of Blessing. Mount Gerizim was the mountain of blessing. So the Samaritans wanted to be on that mountain. They knew it was the mountain of blessing. That's where they live today. Okay. So thanks for the question. It's a good question. Good. Other questions, ideas, and thoughts? Larry, you had a question?
Yes, I have a quick question. This question actually came through our Turkish Instagram, the Noahide World Center Turkish Instagram account. And the person asked the question, his name is Wael El-Maghrabi, a Palestinian guy. And I answered him, but I just need a verification from you. He mentioned that in Ezra 265, when they're talking about the numbers, the count of singers don't match with the count of singers in Nehemiah 767. There's I think there's 30 or 45 people difference. And my research showed that that they were so happy going, singing, additional 40 singers joined them on their way.
On the journey. Where is the verse? Where is the verse in Nehemiah? What number you said?
767.
I don't have. I in America I have my books. I have probably a few thousand books. In Israel I have a handful. Let me just get it. Nehemiah, tell me what chapter?
7
Yeah.
67. The male and female singer count is 245, as opposed to Ezra 265. They're 200.
So the Metzudas David says the following. He said this. Ezra Nema Rakmatayim ki osar mem hey hayu as toni. You need to call him like the. So what you said is correct in one sense, but that doesn't explain. This according to him, this according to one commentary I just saw now, he doesn't say they got added along the way. He does say what you said that they were singing in tremendous joy. But the Metzudas David explains the answer like this. He says that at the time of Ezra, those 45 were minors, and therefore they weren't counted. Later on in the time of Nehemiah, they were grown and they were actually accepted as full singers. That's the Metzudas David. Okay, so the 45 people they weren't right. They weren't counted as the singers yet because they were too young. So it could be Lara. Could be someone says what you said. I haven't seen that yet. But the Metzudas David says what I said, which is I'm not quoting him. But Metzudas David explains that the 45 were minors because the Nehemiah happens later. Right? Ezra goes up first, and Nehemiah goes up later.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Any other questions, ideas, comments? Could be about this, could be about anything. Okay.
I have one tiny little one more. I know it's
Sure.
late in there. I know this is a controversial subject, but regarding God needs us, we need him.
Right.
I have been kind of following that whole discussion between the two rabbis and the intermediaries. And my understanding is that it's not that God needs us because he is incapable of Has v'Shalom doing something, but it is more that he would like to have presence amongst us on earth, and we have to make the world holy place for him to ascend, kind of ideology that I heard. Is this conversation, this discussion ever going to end?
Well, I don't know which rabbis you're referring to, so I'm not sure which conversation that you were talking about before, but
I can tell you their names.
Okay, I mean, it doesn't. Either way, you can. I don't mind hearing their names. But where the people, if there is two people discussing this who know what they're talking about, each saying the side that maybe is saying this idea is because there is a principle. There ain't melech below am. There's no king without people. So it says that God created the world so that we could recognize his, and praise, and everything was created for God's glory. But that's still a misunderstanding to say that he needs that. The reason why he wants us to have that is because it's good for us. It's like think about a parent and a child. The parent, there's different parents. The parent might say, I want my kid to respect me because then I feel good. I need the respect. Another parent might say, I want my kid to respect me because that's the way they're going to be wonderful children. So yes, God wants us to be able to recognize him, but not because he needs it. That nobody should say that, because that's incorrect. The part that maybe people are discussing, I don't know what the conversation is that there is, to be able to give us the good, it requires that we are recognizing God in the appropriate way and serving him in the appropriate way, but not because he needs it, because we need it. So as I was saying, what I said before, no one could argue with that, because it's a premise that God cannot need anything by definition, because the definition of God, he has to be perfect in every way. When a person has any lacking, that is a disqualification, because that can't be God. So nobody could say that. But what maybe some rabbi is saying is that in the process of God wanting to give us, so that means that he wants us to be able to recognize, understand, praise, but not because he needs it, because we need it, because that's the way we could have an association, a connection. Okay, does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful, guys. So I asked if it's possible for next week to move up an hour earlier. Is that possible?
Yeah, I replied on the WhatsApp chat that I was okay with it. I don't know if it's okay with the
I'm
Rod
asking
and
So instead of 4, it'd be 3 p.m.
That's Central Time.
Yeah, 4 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah. I don't. It's not an issue with me. How about you guys? Is it an issue?
do it?
Okay.
All right.
Cheyenne, you cannot do it. Okay.
You
Excellent.
good? Okay. That's good. Okay. So that's good for me too.
3 p.m. Okay, guys.
3
We'll
p.m.
remind each
Central,
other.
4 p.m. Eastern,
Right. Yeah,
11
that's, 1
p.m.
p.m. Pacific.
Israel time.
All right.
Also, guys, when you can to set up, I don't even know where you do it, but to get notified. So when I get ready to send an invite out, I can also send a last minute invite on this app on Zoom. I just don't know how you can do it. Some other people have already done it. It's like they've set it up to where they can be notified for Zoom meetings. So anyway, Rabbi, it's very good. Appreciate it.
Great. We'll
Right
see you
on.
all
Thank
next
you, Rabbi.
week.
I look forward to next week. Beautiful stuff.
Wonderful.
Shalom,
Thanks a lot.
shalom.
See you next week.
That's going to be our class for today for our Working Together series, live with Rabbi Karmi Ingber, who's in Israel. And so our next week class will be 1 hour earlier because of the time lag. I mean, he's staying up so late in the land of Israel. They're 10 hours behind.
Nancy, we're going to try to do it every week this time.
Yeah.
Not just next week. From now on.
Our new time. Okay, yeah. So going forward, our new time will be 4 p.m. Eastern next Sunday, not 5 p.m., 4 p.m. Eastern. That's 3 for our good friends in Texas, and 1 p.m. for all of us here on the Pacific Coast. And so you're all welcome to come back and hear more of the book of Ezra, which I enjoyed the history lesson and the relevance all surrounding it. Beautiful, beautiful stuff as always. Always enjoy Rabbi Ingber's material. So till next week, we're going to sign out. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, everybody.